I just heard somebody's car horn go off. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. This is the Wednesday, April 25th, 2018 edition of our little weather get-together, show number 229, and that features Mr. Andrew Loconto from the National Weather Service in Blacksburg, Virginia. We're going to be talking about the Enhanced Hazardous Weather Outlook product. Maybe if you're a weather weenie, you may know about the Hazardous Weather Outlook. If you're not a weather weenie and you just joined in tonight, we'll talk to you about the new product that's going to be started with many of the National Weather Service offices in the coming months. And Andrew's office up in Blacksburg, Virginia, has kind of been a test bed for that. So we're going to talk to Andrew and see how that's went so far. And he's going to kind of show us the different products of that. So hopefully after tonight's show, you'll kind of be up to the know of what's coming down the road here, maybe for your local weather office. But before we get into tonight's conversation, as always, we have a few housekeeping rules. This is a live broadcast, so if you want to join us tonight with the conversation, you can do that one of many ways. The best way, though, is to reach out on us on Twitter. It's at Carolina WX Group. We'll be monitoring the Twitter feeds throughout the night, and if you have a question for Andrew throughout the show, we'll make sure he sees that. You can also submit those questions via Periscope and Facebook Live, and if you're listening on the YouTube live cast or maybe the podcast later on, we'll let Andrew kind of share the information out how to reach his weather office there in Blacksburg, and you can submit those questions via that way. So we'll do that towards the end of the show. So that is our show tonight. Looking forward to it. It's been kind of another busy week throughout the Carolinas. This week, though, has been a lot of rain and flash flooding and flooding, so we'll talk about that. But before we do that, it's kind of a slow crew tonight. I'm going to bring in an old friend of ours. Yes, he still is around. Ricky Matthews, who is joining us tonight from Bristol, Tennessee. Ricky, we're glad to have you off your Storm Chase CYB Storm Cruiser tour and having you back here tonight with us.
Yeah, that and a combination, just a couple other things. And oh, life, it gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it? But excited to be back and glad to be here and looking forward to tonight's show, Scotty.
Ricky, we're glad to have you back here. Let's go over to Jordan, who is joining us tonight from the Chapel Hill area. Jordan, I know it's been rainy in your area. How much rain did you guys pick up?
Hey, Scotty. Yeah, we got a couple of, maybe an inch or two in this area. Just, some of the convection to the south, I think, robbed us of some instability. So we didn't get quite as much as some of the models were anticipating, but nonetheless, a pretty good soaking for the ground, get rid of some of that pollen, which this time of the year is always nice. Just been a really kind of overcast, dreary couple of days, and the sun finally peeked its way out here this evening, which was a welcome sight for us over here in the Triangle.
It was, and Jordan, we didn't have you on with us last week. Those tornadoes were in Greensboro was pretty close to you.
Sure was. I was actually, let's see, about 10 miles, I would say, as the crow flies from that Greensboro tornado, tracking it closely. And yeah, just pretty crazy. I mean, just that supercell, how long it persisted, all the way from, I think I saw a graphic Dennis Mercero put together showing the origination of that supercell could be tracked all the way to southeast Georgia. And it tracked, all the way up through the Carolinas into Virginia. Just an incredibly long track supercell, and obviously dropped several tornadoes along its path. The Guilford County or Greensboro tornado probably being the most prominent. But yeah, just a spring somewhat typical April spring day in the South.
I'm glad it's typical in the fact that we're not have to really deal with the cold air or the snow anymore.
For sure.
All right, Jordan, thank you for that. Let's go down to the low country tonight and bring in Shay Gibson in Charleston. Shay, how's things down your way this evening?
Well, things are pretty good. I think it's safe to say that we are probably on our way into spring without any further ado. I mean, I don't see anything changing between now and the end of April, for that matter. But if you can see my screen here, things are fairly quiet this evening. That sort of background westerly wraparound flow from the low pressure that came through 2 days ago is pulling out of the area. So we had a really wet Monday where record rainfalls over the Charleston area. But we had some pretty decent sea breezing today. And even with sea surface temperatures down around 64 to 66 degrees, we're still seeing some pretty decent winds. There was mid to upper teens along much of the southeast coast today. from the south-southwest or even southwest, but we're seeing those westerly land breezes kick back in again. But here's for Charleston. For those that want to know, I mean, look at that. You can't really say much more than spring is here for sure. You know, we typically won't see any cold spells until even in the first week of May. But it looks like our warm temperatures are here to stay. It's just going to be up and down with rain, sun and rain. And you know, the flowers are out, so if you're busy planting, now's the time to get it. If you haven't already, it's beautiful out, beautiful day today. Expecting maybe a stormy day tomorrow. We are a little bit on the marginal side for thunderstorms, but we're looking pretty good. In fact, we could use a little bit more rain. Our severe drought monitor. Let me share one more screen. This will be updated tomorrow, and this is for the southeast region. So you can see that as of last week's reading, that some of the areas in southeast are in D2, which is severe, and I expect this to be graduated by tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. when they come out with their new maps. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like. But any more rain is welcome for tomorrow as well. And going into that, Scotty, that's all I can say. It's beautiful here. We're enjoying it. The waters are warming up, and we're enjoying the weather.
We've been out kiteboarding any?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I can't remember the last day we haven't had wind along the coast. So even if it's shifted to the east-northeast or the south-southwest, one way or the other, it's come up almost every single day. I think a lot of folks are maybe looking forward to the break tomorrow.
Awesome.
Or not.
Well, thank you for that report, Shay. And I'm going to toss it to Ricky and let Ricky start off our interview tonight. So, Ricky, it's all yours.
All righty. Thank you so much, Scotty. Andrew, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here, Ricky. Thank you so much.
So just kind of give us a little baseline. We asked this to a lot of our guests. How did you get interested in weather, and how did you end up at the weather service there in Blacksburg?
Yeah, so the weather, I think most people, if you ask any weather hobbyists, I mean, it's one of those things where they've followed weather most of their lives, and it's really no different with me. I'm from Massachusetts originally, as I'm sure many of you probably can pick up my accent, or you will on this show as it goes along. And so really snowstorms, that was my thing up in Massachusetts. There was one event, actually it's the 20-year anniversary of, was May 31st, 1998. We actually had a real bad severe weather outbreak in the Northeast. Real bad tornado outbreak in New York. I think it was the worst on record. I think it still is. And we had some pretty impressive storms even at my parents' house in Worcester, Massachusetts. And that really sort of set my sort of career path in motion at that point. I think that sort of solidified it. And went to college at Plymouth State University in Plymouth, New Hampshire. I was there for 5 years, got my bachelor's and my master's up there. And my first job was at the Climate Prediction Center in Camp Springs, Maryland at the time, but it's now in College Park. So I was there for 2 years, left Climate Prediction Center in 2011. It got me some great, climate knowledge that, has sort of served me well. And then I moved to the Weather Service in Burlington, Vermont, where I was there for a good 5.5 years. Got to do a lot of winters up there. They're long and they're harsh, so it was good to get back to winter. But I was looking for something a little warmer climate, sort of more seasonal, 4 seasons. So I moved down to Blacksburg here in October of, actually it was Halloween of 2016. So just for a little over a year and a half now, getting close to that. And it's been great. It's been really good.
We were chatting kind of before the show started of just how wide Blacksburg's CWA is and the extremes of weather in one part of the region versus the other part of the region. For people who aren't familiar with where Blacksburg is, give us kind of a geographic profile of your CWA.
Sure. So we cover portions of 3 states, the largest of which is Virginia. We cover areas from Buckingham County in central Virginia all the way down to Charlotte County in central Virginia, all the way west. You know, it sort of just sort of skips the sort of the far southwest Virginia, Bristol area. That's covered by our sister office in Morristown, Tennessee. But we also cover 4 counties in southeast West Virginia, Greenbrier County, Summers, Monroe, and Mercer counties. So that's all covered in our forecast area. So we cover, you know, Greenbrier's, you know, pretty popular for good resort town, the PGA Golf Tour. That they have the Masters is one of their events there at the Greenbrier. So we cover those 4 counties, and then we cover the northern mountains of North Carolina, Watauga, Ashe, Allegheny counties, sort of the foothills, Yadkin, Surrey, Wilkes counties, and then you get into sort of the northern, sort of the upper North Carolina Piedmont, sort of just outside of the Triad, Rockingham, Caswell, and Stokes counties. So that it covers a large area. Differences in topography. So you have sort of, you know, here in Blacksburg, it's 2,100 feet, you know, versus out in the Piedmont where it gets down to like 500 feet. So it's quite an interesting contrast. So you get a whole lot of different sort of weather, different climate. Yeah, that's sort of what we sort of cover here. So it's pretty fascinating just how much elevation changes, different weather patterns, really governed by that sort of terrain.
Always something different in our area, seems like, from one week to the other. All right, well, let's chat a little bit about the product you guys are putting out, this Enhanced Experimental Hazardous Weather Outlook. How does it differ from what we're typically kind of used to seeing in that text version? Yeah,
so it serves as sort of a complement to the text hazardous weather outlook, which you may have seen. You know, one of the big drawbacks to the text hazardous weather outlook is that it's a descriptive sort of product. It's all free form text that just sort of describes in general terms where there may be a potential need for either some sort of a watch, a warning, or advisory, or just a general awareness that there may be some hazard that is coming up in the next few days. But what the experimental enhanced hazardous weather outlook, what this does is it's more graphical. You're able to see sort of more it's actually just straight from our Weather Service office forecast database. All those sort of weather information that covers things from fire weather, severe weather, severe storms, tornadoes, winds, both non-thunderstorm and thunderstorm winds. So it does that in sort of a graphical display. Just shows sort of more, you can look at this map and it gives you a great idea of sort of what hazards may be coming up over the next week. I like to think of it as a way to sort of plan your weather week kind of thing in terms of hazards. So that's often good for big picture kind of things. And it's proven to be pretty good. We've used it in different briefings and things like that. It's proven to be pretty good.
How did the idea come up? Was it just something in our office, or was it suggested from a different office and you guys are testing it out, or how did it come up?
Yeah, so it came from actually from New York City. That's the first office sort of in our sort of region that actually has started it. I believe it actually got started. It originated from the Weather Service in Springfield, Missouri, and New York City got word of it, and they were sort of like the pilot, sort of the test bed office initially in sort of our eastern region here. It actually debuted in the January blizzard of 2016 up there. So that's sort of when they sort of rolled it out, and it had good feedback from some of their core partners, which is good. And just over the last, so when I first got here, it was just starting to be implemented at a few sort of test bed offices. They expanded it to a smaller sort of subset of offices here, and fortunately here in Blacksburg, we are one of them. In terms of the Carolinas, also Morehead City is also a test bed office, as is Columbia, South Carolina. So those are sort of the three sort of Carolina offices that currently have it. So yeah, so it was more or less just a. It sort of started from one office, and just offices got word of it, and we're starting to test it out.
So forgive me if you've answered this, but when did the product start?
So it really sort of started here in sort of the eastern region. In January of 2016 is sort of when it got rolled out. So that's an example that you see on your screen of what the product actually looks like. So yeah, so it was in 2016 is sort of when it got started here. I'm not entirely sure when Springfield actually started it. It probably was a few months before then, but it's been sort of been carried over across eastern region here. So that's so we're just hope by this summer, actually, really all of eastern region offices will have this live. So you'll be able to see this at least in an experimental sense, but all offices will have this capability come this summer.
Jay, if we could pull that back up for a second, if possible, and kind of have Andrew walk us through it, and see a lot of different color opportunities and things like that. So kind of walk us through what people are seeing on this page, and then what you guys are hoping to communicate in the different products and hazards.
And Andrew, also, if you wanted to do a screen share yourself and flip back, I think you had Outer Banks and Hatteras up earlier, that you could sort of compare and contrast some of the severe outlooks ongoing now.
Yeah, that would be. Why don't I go ahead and do that? That would be. Okay. That's probably easier. So you should be seeing my screen at this point. And this here is the experimental product that we're sort of running, this Enhanced Hazardous Weather Outlook. You also heard it be called as sort of the graphical HWO, just because it's as opposed to the text product, which on this page you can just click on this little image here. So a link right there will bring you straight to the Hazardous Weather Outlook text product if you wanted to see that. But this is sort of a neat little new service that the Weather Service is sort of getting involved with. So there's this little graphic here that covers, in this case, the default one here is the severe thunderstorm risk. But over here on the right, we have this sort of what's called, sort of colloquially anyway, the Chiclet Chart. Because it looks like sort of those chiclet sort of candies that you may have had as a kid in the 80s and 90s. And what you can do for each specific, say you wanted to know about what the lightning risk was, say on Friday, you just click on this little image and it would change to the lightning risk. And it's sort of color-coded by threat. So, for example, if there's a limited risk of lightning, that would be shaded in yellow. Likewise, all the way up to significant, that would be shaded in red, and then extreme would be that'd be shaded in purple. And if you wanted more information about what those sort of categorical thresholds, what does that even mean? Sort of down here at the bottom, there's a listing of sort of how that is put together. So, for example, for limited a limited lightning threat, it would be sort of if you have, say, scattered thunderstorms in your forecast, this would show up as a limited color. So you'd see several sort of pixels of yellow that would show up. Likewise, if it's extreme, this would indicate nearly continuous cloud to ground lightning strikes. And this is sort of difficult to really sort of quantify, especially in a big, like in a day. Because really this comes down to several, really just a few minutes to an hour. So sometimes that'll be shaded in purple in a case where you're really expecting continuous lightning, say from severe thunderstorms, slower moving thunderstorms, just because you have those storms that are slower moving, you're more likely to get lightning at greater frequency in one area. So that's sort of an example of how lightning works. sort of lightning risk hazard would work. And then some of these, in terms of hazards, some of these just come straight out of our, just sort of our weather forecasts that we put out, you know, four, 5, 6 times a day. And we'll try to update this usually twice a day. If there is some active weather, for instance, if we have watches up or watches or warnings, then we'll tend to update this a little more frequently to sort of indicate, you know, sort of that the threat is ongoing or the threat's ended. That's sort of the approach there. So, for example, excessive heat, that keys straight off of the heat index product. So that's indicated. We also have excessive cold in the wintertime, in which case it keys off of the wind chill temperature. And you can just see the different thresholds there that sort of are sort of defined here in this little table down here. And just some impacts that, you know, are possible or even likely with some of these sort of conditions, and sort of the idea to, you know, take necessary actions to keep yourself from experiencing these sort of hazards. So the nice thing is about this sort of layout is it gives you, you know, again, it's sort of a way to sort of plan, sort of a weather planner for, you know, hazards, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. So currently, sort of in our area, there's really not a whole lot of active weather. There are some flood warnings that we have in effect for some of our river basins. But what I'll do is I'll show you on this next screen here is a little more instructive, where it sort of shows more colors, where it's a little busier. For example, this is Morehead City's Hazardous Weather Outlook. They're another office that's running it. And for example, here's the lightning risk. So they, you know, so Morehead City likely had some, you know, isolated scattered thunderstorms across, you know, portions of their forecast area. Since they're a coastal office, they deal with, you know, have marine hazards as well. So they'll cover some of those in there as well. Winds and waves, high surf, and likewise they can do. You can click again, just pick any point in time. Just click on these little chiclets here if there's a certain hazard you want to key on. For example, I want to know what my risk of non-thunderstorm winds is on, say, Sunday. And you can see there's a few pixels of them sort of along the Outer Banks, Hatteras area. So that's, and then again, you can always just go down to the bottom here and you can see sort of what that, why it's colored like that. You know, for example, this little limited area means that there's sustained winds of 20 to 29 miles per hour, or there's gusts 30 to 44 miles per hour, which, you know, could, you know, blow over some tents, you know, or, you know, some other, you know, even some shallow rooted trees. That's also a possibility. So it is sort of a really nice product that you can, that you could sort of really sort of gain a lot of input on, just to sort of plan your week, which is sort of the best way to describe it. Great for big picture. You want to just like a big picture look, as far as, you know, hazards coming up in the next 7 days. So that's all. That's sort of just a quick little overview of what the Enhanced Weather Outlook is. So that's sort of what we're sort of looking at.
So Andrew, I got a couple of questions for you. We'll start with number one, and
Sure.
let me get that stop presenting on you there. That particular product, is that populated off of a gridded system that you operate from through forecast, populating those areas, or is that more of a human element driving most of the tables that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of that just falls right out of our forecast database, sort of our forecast grids that we manipulate every day, and we'll issue the sort of our forecast packages that come out. There are a couple on there that are sort of more manual. The flooding one especially is one that's almost entirely at discretion of forecasters in terms of how they want to code that. And I could show that here really quickly. I'll just sort of share my screen here again, just for the flooding one. Like say, for example, for us, I mean, it's a possibility we could have had, at least some limited flooding here indicated for sort of one of our Roanoke Basin here, sort of in the Randolph area. And likewise into South Boston as well. There's some river flood warnings that are up there. So it is sort of subjective there. Flooding again, that's probably one that is really one that is sort of subjective and up to the forecaster how to sort of input that. A lot of times some forecasters will key off the excessive rainfall outlooks that WPC issues as sort of a proxy for sort of describing an expected hazard. For example, they may color it elevated if say there's a slight risk of flooding. I think that was the case for the recent rainfall we've had just over the last few days, sort of in our southern Blue Ridge counties, from Floyd to Watauga counties. So that is the one that is sort of subjective. But the tornado, the severe weather ones, those all come from SPC. The exception is like beyond day 4.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That was gonna be my second question was going by SPC convective outlooks. Those usually stop at day 3, but your table goes out to day 6 in your tables for hazardous weather outlooks. But I'm sure that's all. I mean, you had non-thunderstorm winds there too. That's reading off GFS and other models as well to sort of feed the overall winds in the area. So yeah, did you want to take that one past day 3?
Yeah. So those, again, that severe thunderstorm risk, that all comes from the SPC convective outlooks. Beyond day 4 to day 7, that's also sort of manual forecaster sort of discretion if they choose to include that. Typically, what is done if there's if SPC has drawn in an area on the day 4 to 7 outlook, if it's a 15% probability of severe weather within 25 miles of the point, then it would get shaded in as elevated. So that's sort of what you can sort of expect for the day 4 to 7 sort of period in the EHWO. And that's just the acronym there, the EHWO. It's sort of what we call it.
Are you getting ready to talk?
But for day 1 through 3, that all just keys off of the SPC outlooks, which is good consistency between sort of the local offices and sort of the experts at the Storm Prediction Center.
So, Andrew, I have a question. My little cousin David's here. He's wanted to join in on the conversation. How is emergency managers? How have they adapted to this? Do they like the new product, or have you really had any feedback from them?
To my knowledge, I haven't been aware of any feedback. But I do know from other offices that, especially, New York City had several positive feedback, up there. But specific to Blacksburg, I'm not 100% aware of any. At least that I've seen. It's possibility that, and just to show you how to get to it, just from our office here. Weather.gov/RNK under current hazards. Just sort of hover over that little link there, and you click down to Enhanced Hazardous Weather Outlook. It's a possibility that maybe the emergency managers or state official, county officials, maybe they're just not, just aware of it. It's sort of more difficult to find. I wonder if maybe that has something to do with it, but at least to my knowledge, we haven't heard of much feedback, at least that I'm aware of.
I'm just going to say the way that it's broken down and by the days and the levels of hazards, I feel like that'd be pretty useful for them as they do their advanced planning. And I think you had said that, you guys help with the Greenbrier golf tournament at the PGA Tour and stuff. So even with Virginia Tech football, it seems like it would be easy for those officials to kind of look at this, a few days out and say, hey, here's the hazards that we really need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, and I do know that New York City is using it to brief FEMA Region 2. So in that case, it's gone federal up there, so which is good. And you're absolutely right. I mean, some of these test offices, I've been using them in sort of just partner briefings, just to give them a quick little heads up and really that's what this product is designed for. Just a big picture look of expected hazards coming up in the next 1 to 6 days. So it's pretty good. That's certainly I think moving forward that would be a great way to sort of just give a quick little brief to sort of emergency management officials and sort of our core partners.
Andrew, I noticed on some of the products that, it's kind of based on a criteria. Is there any thought given into how widespread an event would be, if it's going to be, duration or impact level, something like that? Does that factor into the level, I guess, that's given?
That's in terms of how that probably is a factor, but a lot of this, there's several of these sort of elements here sort of fall right out of our forecast grids, and some of the forecasters, they can do some editing to it, just to in a case where say you have say a long duration snow event where maybe significant doesn't cover it. Forecasters can edit that sort of up or down. Depending on, they can edit that hazard grid there, and they can edit that up and down to sort of convey the threat of, for instance, if it's a long duration snow event, or if it's one of those, if it's like a heavy wet snow, because that often causes more impact than sort of a light, sort of puffy, powdery kind of snow. Versus, like a heavy wet snow where it weighs on trees, downs power lines. It's more difficult to shovel, so there's sort of like a human health element there. So yeah, forecasters, they can edit those to sort of, if it is sort of a more prolonged sort of event that could be widespread. But that's sort of a good little starting point. That at least as a start, and then forecasters can edit it as they deem necessary. But that's sort of one thing that may sort of factor in.
Gotcha. Can you give us an example of something that was an extreme day?
Let's see. Extreme. I don't know if the March. If the March snow event we had, sort of the March 24th snow event we had in the New River Valley here in Virginia, I don't know if that would have added up. And actually, I believe it would have. Just looking at, again, I'll just share my screen here really quick, just so you could see sort of the threshold there. So I have the snow and sleet risk sort of highlighted. And at the bottom, the extreme would be snow or sleet with greater than or equal to 10 inches. Along the Blue Ridge and west, that's sort of the areas that tend to see more snow than that's the areas out in the east. By the east, meaning east of the Blue Ridge, where those thresholds there are a little bit lower, just because snow is. It's not uncommon to get snow there, but it's when it is, it's pretty impactful, even small amounts of snow. But sort of here in the western sort of mountains, that includes the Allegheny, Ashe and Watauga counties. When I said Blue Ridge and West, I think that March 24th snow event we just had this winter, that probably would have classified as extreme, especially along some of the mountains there, where we had snow amounts as much as, I believe, forecasts as much as a foot. So that certainly would have qualified. So I think that was one, but I'm not 100% positive, but I think that would have met that sort of criteria.
Gotcha. Things we don't like to see so much on our products.
No, absolutely not.
All right. Well, I'll open up the floor here to any of our panel members who may have a question. Anything from you guys?
Yeah, I've got a quick one for you, Andrew. You were showing, I think it was the lightning threat for Morehead City's office. And let me just share my screen here real quick. I'll pull it back up. 1 second.
Sure.
Here we go. And, given that it looks like, some of these fields are heavily driven by the gridded data sets, which makes sense. I just noticed looking here, it looks like, for tomorrow, pretty much all of the Morehead City area is in a limited shading, except for Cape Lookout, which for some reason is classified in none. So I'm just curious, is there a risk, for localized areas that, that we could be telling people in a specific area, well, it looks like you don't have to worry about lightning, but everywhere else in the region, there's at least a limited threat. So I'm just wondering, without that augmentation from the forecaster, could that be a potential issue there?
Yeah, I guess there's sort of that, sort of the idea that maybe some, sort of confusing messaging there, maybe. That sort of all falls out of their forecast grids. So I would think that if you actually clicked on, say, the point and click forecast for that sort of area where there is that green shading, it probably would not show there to be any sort of thunder there. So yeah, that just all sort of falls right out of their their sort of forecast database there. Whereas
that or the cool sea surface temperatures might be factored in there as well.
Yeah, that could be a sort of a limiting factor too. Just especially like that. I actually haven't really looked too much at the weather for tomorrow, but I don't think it's a pattern that's really potential like sea breeze kind of idea, just because, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one more question for you, and that is, it's been experimental for, let's see, nearly 2 years now, or going on the second year, because it started in 2016. And I remember we had a guest on the show whenever this started up. Scotty, remember that? When I think it was a wintertime show for a snow event. But at what point will this not be experimental anymore and actually be put into practice? Is that something that's being discussed now? Is it? I know we're going through the proving grounds, but is there sort of a timeline to look forward to?
Yeah. So as far as this being actually truly operational, those discussions are still ongoing. I wish I could provide you at sort of a time when it may become operational, but I don't have that information. But what I can tell you is that for all of our sort of our Eastern region offices, so really all the offices that serve the Carolinas, this will become available by this summer. But as far as when we'll be able to sort of lift that experimental tag, that's sort of still up in the air. Again, I wish I had that information available to sort of show you to tell you on the show, but that I just don't have. But one thing I will say though is that if you do see or have any feedback, that's great for us to really sort of and there's a link at the bottom too, and I can quickly show you where that link is. I'll just quickly share my screen and go back to the. So you click this little electronic survey at the bottom. It's a green hyperlink there that's shown. That's great for just letting us know what's good about the product and what we can improve, and that's really important, really, for a lot of our new experimental products. we just released the probabilistic snowfall outlook. Just I'm sure that's been that's sort of another example where that type of information feedback is good for us. But certainly for the Enhanced Hazardous Weather Outlook, that sort of electronic survey with both positive and not so positive feedback is beneficial for us to make this product the best it can be.
So if it's non-operational, does that mean I have to put the giant disclaimer on there? It says the EHWO is non-operational, experimental, blah, 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 like O16?
Like O16. Yeah, it is. There's that experimental word up on there, but that is sort of funny. I do like that.
Yeah.
All right. We appreciate everything that you do, even experimentally. I mean, that's it's all helping going towards the great cause, everything that you guys do for great effort. And so thank you for working hard on this product, because we know that it does work. It helps out a lot with the forecasting tools.
Well, thank you, Shay, and thank you all for letting me talk about the hazardous weather outlook.
No problem. But we're not gonna let you off the hook yet. We do have a viewer question. It's not really dealing with the topic that we're talking about, but Dean Davidson was wanting to know if you could discuss maybe briefly about the tornadoes you guys had come through the area, and he was wanting to know specifically one about Bedford County, Virginia. Maybe you just kind of talk about the tornadoes that moved through your forecast area, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. Actually, I think today we actually just it's funny that we sort of let off the show just with the Greensboro tornado and that supercell that pretty much tracked from. I mean, that supercell really tracked all the way up into Central Virginia. Sort of the most impactful. And that's not to necessarily, minimize the other tornadoes that affected, but sort of the biggest one in our forecast area was the Campbell to Amherst County one. And that one, we actually just expanded the track and the time. It was on the ground for almost a half an hour. So that was an EF3. So that caused some really significant damage. And so that was sort of the major one. Actually, that went through the western sort of side of Lynchburg on the way. So that's sort of Lynchburg is our second biggest city in our sort of area of responsibility. So that's sort of significantly. This is a big one, a really important one. The tornado that went through Greensboro, it tracked its way through Rockingham County, the eastern part of the county, and went up through Monroeton, Reedsville, Ruffin, and it was rated an EF2. So that and there was I believe some of the worst damage there was. At least that was reported to us, and what we had surveyed was a mobile home that was carried, I believe it was 80 to 120 yards into a car, where there were 7 injuries resulted as that mobile home was ripped off its foundation and sort of hurtled in the 80 to 120 yards onto this motor vehicle. So not only was there damage to people, injuries unfortunately to the residents, but also the people in the car as well. So that was the second one. That same tornado moved all the way up into the western part of Danville as well, which is our third biggest city. So that's, I believe there was one that was an EF1 that was in Bedford. I think that was just released today. If I'm correct on that, so that would be the fourth one. And then we had sort of, I think that fourth one was on the ground for maybe a minute or two. It was pretty small in terms of, as far as how long it was on the ground for. A lot of these, and then we had also one in Craig County, sort of just northwest of Roanoke, that, sort of in the Craig County area. That was also an EF1. That was also on the ground for just a minute, but it was enough to flip cars. and caused some pretty good tree damage as well. That was 5 tornadoes, and just that was kind of an interesting day because you maybe didn't have the sort of, we talk about what sort of what parameters you need for severe weather. It's really strong instability or buoyancy. You also need some sort of mechanism, a lifting mechanism. In this case, it was a really strong frontal zone. You also need to have the good moisture, and it was one of the first few days we had dew points in the 60s, if I remember right. So sort of seasonably high moisture, and then we also had the wind shear was off the charts. That was real impressive for, and I know just sort of working that event. Danville reached 80 degrees, and once Danville reached 80, we knew it was going to be bad. But it was interesting too because you get on the other side of the Blue Ridge, and it was it was cooler and what we call more stable. So the atmosphere there was a little more hostile for severe thunderstorms. But just given how much wind shear was in the atmosphere, you really did not need much instability to cause severe weather. And we see those sort of cases a lot of times in the Carolinas, especially early in the severe weather season. It's sort of what's called the high wind shear, low cape scenarios. Those are the ones that can produce some. Really, I would say it, and a lot of times that produces some of our worst severe weather.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it kind of, for your area, the old myth that tornadoes can't hit mountainous areas, and that's just totally not true. As a lot of your forecast area, is pretty mountainous in that area. So, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. I want to give you the opportunity to pass along any social media if you want to promote the office, or maybe even your personal Twitter account, how folks can get in touch with you guys.
Yeah. So our personal office, or my personal Twitter account is @Andrew Loconto, Loconto. So how you spell my last name. So that's my personal account. But definitely, especially if you live really in our forecast area, sort of our office Twitter account is @NWS Blacksburg, and we greatly appreciate any reports of photos of any sort of. We try to be as interactive as we can be, and really any sort of reports we get, especially in active weather, or even in inactive weather, just feel free to give the office a tweet. We greatly appreciate that.
And I think Shay will echo these thoughts as he helps me with booking and stuff. Anytime we've asked Blacksburg office for help on our show, they've always been willing to help us. And so we want to extend our appreciation and thanks to you guys up there as well for jumping on anytime we ask.
Yeah, no, and thank you for having me on the show. And, I certainly speak for all of us here in the Weather Service in Blacksburg. We appreciate the opportunity to come on the show. No question. And we thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no problem. Well, we're going to switch over to our tweets of the week right quick. So before we end our show, does anybody I know Ricky had shared his tweet earlier in our little chat. So Ricky, you want to start with yours or?
Yeah, give me about 2 seconds up here. Stand by. That's not what I wanted to share. That's what I wanted to share. This is kind of neat. I found this from Tim Cermak the other day, Towering CU on Twitter. This is a link to get photographs based off the vertical wind profiles from the 88Ds. So, for example, we can take, let's pick GSP tonight, for example, and we'll click Generate Photograph, Bulk Richardson right moving photograph. And there's a nice little photograph, which thankfully is pretty calm tonight over GSP. I was trying to think of an area that would be kind of wind shearish tonight. There's really not a whole lot of areas. We could try AKQ, Wakefield, Virginia, and see what they get. A little bit more curvature there. But basically, this was kind of neat. And with those storms that were down in the Mobile, Pensacola area the other day. This was the wind profile from some of those storms that produced the tornadoes near Fort Walton Beach. You can see the nice curved photograph there showing the nice wind shear they had over the area. 30 knots, 0 to 1, 0 to 6 was 56. Storm relative helicity, 0 to 1 kilometers was 310, and 462 for 0 to 3. So, yeah, that would pretty much do it. So, neat little site. You want to see what the wind profile is over your area.
All right. Thank you for that, Ricky. That's pretty cool. We'll have to bookmark that one. Jordan, you have yours, or Shay?
I do.
All right, go ahead, Jordan.
Hopefully you can see it. So yeah, sticking on the severe weather theme, a lot of in the news lately about how little tornadoes have occurred in the traditional tornado alley out in the Great Plains, and so this was a neat tweet actually from NWS Sacramento, who apparently there have been more California tornadoes year to date than there have been in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, basically the entire Great Plains with the exception of Texas, I believe, combined. So just a pretty incredible drought of tornadoes there, although the pattern looks like it might be changing to a more favorable Great Plains setup going into early May. So we'll see how long this drought continues.
Does that mean Scotty and I need to drive west?
That's right. I need to drive west. Let's go.
It's time.
I know Rick Smith, a buddy of ours here at the show. Rick's been very vocal about folks not letting their guard down. He said, we've had slow starts to the tornado season before, and I think he tweeted out, and it should have been my tweet of the week. He said, but after one day, they had 56 reports, from an outbreak that happened. I think it was maybe 2010, 2011, something like that. But just because it's a slow start doesn't mean it's going to be a bad season. And it's like I think as Gary Stevenson says, it only takes one storm to affect your house for it to be a bad season. So definitely, and like you said, Jordan, it does look like the pattern starts to change a little bit out there next week. So Shay, you have one pulled up?
I do. I'm trying to check the local storm reports for the Fort Walton area because mine has to do with that. It's not actually a tweet. It looks better on Facebook, and I'm going to get that playing right here. I think this was the EF0 tornado is what this was listed as. So that's what the local storm report is saying for the 22nd. And let's see, I'll go ahead and this was a really, really interesting spin up, and it's I'll go ahead and push play here. This was a water spout, came in off the ocean, ended up over land as a rotation aloft, then picked up some momentum and grabbed the roof off of a house before it made its presence over water again, which turned into a full water spout. And you'll see it in its evolution here. What a vantage point this guy has being up on, I don't even know, maybe the third, fourth floor of what looks like a condo building, but you can see that the violent twisting and it just pretty much tore the roof off of this brick house on the other side of the sound there. Comes across the river. Of course, there's some verbiage going on here, which we'll mute. There, nothing too bad, but basically just some screaming and concerned people.
And
Shay, wife is what I remember.
Yeah, and Shay, while this is going on, I think it was James Spanner. Someone said, if you notice the dam or the debris that's going in the water, the big splashes it's making, he was making a point that that's the debris that could potentially affect an individual if they weren't really taking shelter from this.
Oh, absolutely. That kind of thing right there would it could definitely injure if not kill people. That kind of debris, even if it looks flimsy in the air, and you can see this coming onto land and keeping more spin and snapping some power lines and blowing a transformer or two, and it's definitely a tornado. This was listed as EF0 in the LSR for the Fort Walton area. That's not the National Weather Service Mobile. But yeah, absolutely, James Spann is correct. That debris, even though when you see it on camera, it looks like it's moving slow, looks like it could be light. That could be giant chunks of roof that weighs hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. It's just being suspended. And it looks like it's floating because it's light, but it's not. When it hits the ground, if you're under it, it's not good. So, and James Spann actually has been posting a lot of material with 2x4s and objects going through walls of homes into the hallways, which once again stresses the fact that you should be in the central closed-in area of the house if there's a tornado nearby. It's just that important, even in a bathtub in the central bathroom. even better because you're more shielded. So it's that's exactly right, Scotty. I'm glad there's nobody in that house. It was reported everybody's okay. There's no one injured, and that everybody's okay. It just sort of went through the area very quickly, and people got lucky. So yeah, pretty intense though. I mean, how it goes from one from land to water to land to water, or water to land, and the other way around, hopping. But typically those are classified as water spouts, but it did do some damage on land, so they did classify it EF0 once again. So interesting, very interesting weather.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know the person taking that video should have been inside, but just dramatic footage. It seems like we're getting more and more of these dramatic footages of tornadoes, and it's dangerous because of that debris that we were talking about. You just never know where it's going to go. My tweet of the week tonight is kind of Weather Service related. I love these maps, and this one was tweeted out today by Daryl Hersman. This was since January 1st, 2015 up into today, the number of special weather statements. And I know in some areas there are other verbiage to it, but kind of the whole general thing is just special weather statements. Maybe it's about thunderstorms or heavy rain or wintry weather, but whatever the case may be, as you can see, the Southeast really hitting it home with these special weather statements. Up there in Andrews' neck of the woods, they had over 4,000 of them sent out. GSP over 4,000. The Peachtree City office almost 6,000, and then down there Charleston's office, Shay, approaching 1,500, and over in the Raleigh area, just over 2,300 of these special weather statements issued. So it kind of shows you the hotbed that the Southeast is with any type of weather. So I guess the lone is the Las Vegas office. They've only had 4 since January 1st, 2015. So
that's a very interesting map. That's really, really neat. Let me present that to everybody so it's up on the screen all the time.
Let me go back to it, Shay. I've already logged off of it. Hold on 1 second.
I'm gonna make a comment about Georgia. Wow, that's
where's it at? All right, can you see it?
Yeah, the
okay.
Atlanta area. That's pretty fascinating. That's an area where a lot of thunderstorm activity occurs. You have a lot of urban heat island effects in those areas, and I mean, wow, that's amazing that area. I mean, Northeast Florida, Southeast Georgia, I just wouldn't think to see that many in the Atlanta area, but it makes total sense for where it is. And we're not just sipping on sweet tea here in Charleston, by the way. They are a little bit conservative, but
well, and one thing that kind of strikes me is how the whole East Coast has got, numbers almost in the thousands. And then you look at the Washington, D.C., Baltimore office, and they've got 226. So that's kind of stuck out to me as well.
Definitely. And sometimes that depends on, local office policy. Sometimes that will play into it. The special weather statement too. It's one of those sort of free-form products that it's a catch-all for some offices. Will use it for example, just to raise awareness of severe weather on a particular day. I believe in the March 24th event, with the snow event we tried to use it to sort of indicate the onset of wintry, sort of more hazardous wintry conditions. And then they're sort of like for sub-severe thunderstorms in the summertime. I think just with the maximum across the Southeast, you sort of get those sort of what we call pulse thunderstorm days where the storm will come right up. In a couple of volume scans, they're gone. A lot of times the special weather statement is usually the way to go with those. But, if storms get stronger, then obviously we'll pull the trigger with the severe. But, typically the special weather statement is a good way to handle those kind of summertime sort of sub-severe storms that sort of give you a good soaking downpours and, continual excessive lightning.
I know they're well used here in Western North Carolina. Like you said, during summertime thunderstorm season, I have them, the INWS that comes to my phone, and it's just one after the other. So, but they're very useful. And Ricky, I think your office, Morristown, I think they may use a different verbiage in special weather statement. It's slipping my mind what they're called, but
So yeah, they issue special weather statements and significant weather advisories. But there's a criteria for significant weather advisories. It's over, I believe, 40-mile-per-hour winds or a certain amount of hail, lightning. It's kind of not really seen as a step higher, but it's just another product that's out there. It seems to be more popular in central and western regions, kind of deal. Southeast region.
Yeah, I knew it was. I just couldn't remember the verbiage of what they called them. So, well, let's quickly look at the schedule. What's coming up next week? As we've been talking about here for the latter part of the show, we're going to discuss the Greensboro tornado next week with Tim Buckley, chief meteorologist at WFMY, and Taryn Kirksey. He is also meteorologist at WFMY. This will be Taryn's first appearance on Carolina Weather Group, and I think he's been in the Carolinas almost a year now, so we finally got to snag him into our show. And then on the 9th of May, we're going to have Dana Griffin on from the National Weather Service in Huntsville, Alabama. We're going to be talking about the global lightning mapper. And then on the 16th of May, Cheryl Nelson, a meteorologist in Norfolk, Virginia. She's going to be joining us to talk about preparing for the storm as we get ready to enter the hurricane season and severe weather season. We're going to be talking about that. And then on the 23rd of May, we're going to be talking about lightning physics with Dr. Eric Bruning out of the Texas Tech University. So Ashley was able to secure that show for us. So that's what it looks like for the next 4 weeks here on the Carolina Weather Group. And as always, we say, if you have any suggestions or any topics or guests you would like for us to bring on, just send us a tweet or Facebook message, and we will definitely reach out and see if we can get those shows scheduled for you. So we're always open to suggestions. So again, as we close out, glad to have Ricky back with us, and we hope you all have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the weather, and it looks like it's going to be fairly calm, and it looks like a big warm-up in store for most of us next week as well. I know I, for one, am looking forward to that. I'm ready to get the 80s. I'm done with all this cool weather, so. And Jordan's give me a thumbs up. So everyone have a great weekend, and we will see you back here next Wednesday night on the Carolina Weather Group.